This is Agriculture Today. I'm Samantha Bennett with the K-State Radio Network. Ahead of us on this Wednesday's program, we start with Chief Agricultural Program Specialist from the Kansas Farm Service Agency, Carla Wikoff. She discusses the expansion of the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, otherwise known as CREP, in areas surrounding the Arkansas River. Also ahead, K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor and Ph.D. student Justin Bina join us to share information about their latest tool developed for AgManager.info, the Meat Demand Monitor Dashboard. We conclude today's programming with this week's Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts, where K-State experts Brad White, Phillip Lancaster, and Bob Larson answer a listener's question on preparing cows in their fall calving herd nutritionally for winter. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. Agriculture Today. We are back now with Carla Wikoff. She is a Chief Agricultural Program Specialist from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. So, Carla, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having us here. Today we want to talk about the CRP, what we call CRP CREP. What CREP stands for is Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program. It's another program that's included with CRP. And what this program is a partnership with the Kansas Department of Ag and FSA, and it is a program that is it's land along the upper Arkansas River Basin, and now we have added additional area to that with the Rattlesnake Creek Subbasin area. So that has expanded a little bit. The purpose of this program is to reduce ag chemicals and sediment that contribute to poor water quality from waters of the Kansas in the High Plains Aquifer and the Arkansas River. We want to reduce irrigation water use and any non-point source contaminants in the water that are along this acreage, and establish permanent vegetative cover on that land, and then you permanently retire the water rights on that land. So just a little bit about that program, the highlights of that program. It is specific to the area along the Arkansas and along the Rattlesnake Creek area. And the counties that have land available to sign up in this program are Barton County, Edwards County, Finney County, Ford, Gray, Hamilton, Kearney, Kiowa, Pawnee, Pratt, Reno, Rice, and Stafford County.
So, Carla, when it comes to this expanding program, what do the requirements really look like for those that are interested in signing up for it?
Some of the requirements is that at least 51% of the land that you're wanting to enroll in this program is physically located within this project area. So you might visit your service center and see if you have land around in those areas, check with them, and check this program out.
And along the lines of payments, what can producers that sign up for this program really expect when it comes to the payments from it?
They do pay on what they call irrigated soil rental rates. So our regular CRP that we have, we usually pay on a dryland rate on CRP, but this program has a little higher rate, and it's based on the irrigated rates. It's a continuous sign-up, so you can go in at any time to your office. There's no specific period of time that you have to go in and sign up. You can go in and check on that, and county offices can help you through that process. These contracts are 14 to 15 years as part of the requirement within this program, and they have the eligible practices that are on there. So if you're familiar with CRP at all, you know that we're putting permanent cover out on that CRP ground, and there's different options. So within this practice, there's establishment of permanent native cover, or you can use a permanent wildlife habitat mix. There's some shallow water areas for wildlife practice, filter strips, wetland restoration practice, any prairie strips. These each have their own rules in this program, and so, like I said, visit your service center and they can sure help you out walking through the process on this program.
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of continuous programs, I know that you have a little bit of an update probably for some continuous CRP that can be signed up for at any time as well.
Right. So another arm of the CRP program is the continuous, which is very similar to this, but we have different practices involved. Normally in Kansas, the continuous practices are on smaller pieces of ground, like a field windbreak or grass waterway, a filter strip, or habitat buffers for upland birds. We have available on that. You can go in at any time, once again, on this practice and check out eligibility for this. Visit with our offices to see what might best work on your land. The nice thing about this is you don't have to go through any kind of competitive process. If the land is eligible and the practices are eligible, the producer can move through the process and the service center can get those contracts approved, and they become effective the first day of the following month after it's been approved. So you can move through that type of sign-up a little bit faster than our general CRP sign-up.
Absolutely, yeah, efficient turnaround for sure. And then I know you guys have been staying busy at the Farm Service Agency this summer with a lot of different sign-ups going on. So tell us a little bit about some of those updates.
So we did have what we call a general sign-up, which is the competitive CRP. It's naturally more the larger pieces of land that people want to put in CRP, but it's a competitive process. So a national office sets a certain period of time for a sign-up for that, and then producers have an opportunity. There's a lot of different types of covers to put in the general sign-up. Once again, visit with your offices and they can help you out to try to find out what would best work on the land that you have. Just a little plug for that. In Kansas, all of our CRP acreage, we have just under 1.9 million acres that are in CRP in Kansas. And within that number that we have, grassland CRP has kind of come in the background and become a little bit more interested with producers, and we have a little over 153,000 acres that are already signed up in that. And that program hasn't been running quite as long as all of these other programs. The positive thing about the grassland CRP is you have expiring CRP and you're not wanting to break it out. There's an opportunity to put it in this grassland CRP and maybe get some cost share on some watering facilities or some interior fence that FSA would help cost share on that program for. So another program that's an option in there, if grazing is something that you have an interest in that you want to do with your CRP, it's just another option for land that's coming out of a general sign-up CRP process. We have quite a few acres that are coming out this year and next year in CRP, so it's just another alternative to look at of what to do with your land.
And I know that we've gone through already a lot of sign-ups and contracts and signatures are being collected and things like that. But upcoming sign-ups, what can people expect?
So right now we don't have any specific dates, but we know with the 2018 Farm Bill, they require us to have a general sign-up every year of the Farm Bill. So we know that's going to be coming up probably after the beginning of the year. So stay tuned. That information, that they usually send out a lot of information when the general sign-up starts. A lot of times it's a few months into the year, but we're kind of getting some signs that maybe they're prepping for that a little bit sooner this year. So stay tuned on that.
Absolutely, yeah. The 2023 Farm Bill is quickly approaching. I think it's been in the back of everybody's minds the past several months. And then, Carla, anything else you'd like to cover before we close out?
We have a lot of options under CRP, so I would just strongly encourage you to visit your service center, visit with them, and they can certainly get you in a place where you can maybe help make some decisions about doing something in the CRP program.
Absolutely. And for those tuning in that are maybe looking for more information online, where can they find that at?
Online, the FSA has a website, www.usda.fsa.gov. And there's a lot of information within that. Actually, with FSA, there's a lot of information there. But if you go across the top of that screen, you can see that there's different programs, and you click on those, and then you can get in more depth as you go through that listing on the website.
Absolutely. So different fact sheets and things of that nature.
Yes, I think there's an option there across the top of the screen that I think it says news release, news data information. You click on that, and there's a whole line of information that's there, and there is a listing of fact sheets, and they're listed in groups. So you click on that fact sheet portion, and then it has listed like your ARC PLC programs, your conservation programs, your disaster programs, all of that information is on that website. So you can go there and search.
Excellent. Well, a great starting place for sure. And then those, of course, that maybe have additional questions to their specific land or things like that, they, of course, can go to their local office and get more information like you mentioned. But, Carla, thank you so much for your time today.
You bet.
Once again, that was Carla Wikoff. She is the Chief Agricultural Program Specialist from the Kansas Farm Service Agency. Still ahead, before we cut to a short break on this Wednesday's programming, we have joining us K-State livestock economist Glynn Tonsor and Ph.D. student Justin Bina. Join us to share information about their latest tool developed for AgManager.info, the Meat Demand Monitor dashboard. Also still ahead, this week's edition of BCI's Ask the Experts, where K-State experts Brad White, Phillip Lancaster, and Bob Larson answer a listener's question on preparing cows in their fall calving herd nutritionally for winter. As always, if you are on the go and listening to us on the radio with one of our radio station partners, and you're wanting to listen to more from Agriculture Today through the rest of today's programming, be sure to check out our podcast. We are available as a podcast anywhere podcasts can be found. Simply search for Agriculture Today, and you should find us there. So that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, once again, anywhere podcasts can be found. Be sure to give us a listen, and that's also where the show notes for today's program can also be found with all of the available links that are discussed during today's programming. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. We are back now with Glynn Tonsor. He is a livestock economist here at K-State, as well as one of his PhD students, Justin Bina. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks for having us on, Samantha.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So today we're going to be talking about a new tool that you guys have launched on AgManager, but it's actually in conjunction with a whole project in and of itself that you guys are doing, and it's the Meat Demand Monitor. So tell us a little bit about that.
So the Meat Demand Monitor is, MDM is the acronym sometimes you'll see. It's a project that's been going on since February of 2020. It's a national survey of U.S. residents. It's funded by the Pork and Beef Checkoff, as well as K-State, where we house this project. And the core point of it is to track, hence the term monitor, meat demand patterns. So large survey, always collecting data. All the information on this project is available on our AgManager.info website. So there are standard 4-page PDFs that come out every month, the raw data, survey instruments, all that is available for people interested in this. But what we've added to that project very recently, and that's why we're here today, is this dashboard. And I'll let Justin describe the dashboard briefly.
So as Glynn mentioned, the Meat Demand Monitor is a national survey, but we have to keep in mind that consumer behavior varies across the country, state by state, region by region. If you think in the short term, and maybe thinking about COVID-19, we saw varying risk preferences across consumer groups and across areas of the country. If you think in the long term, we are seeing interstate shifts in population, which brings about differing consumer behavior in varying parts of the country over time. And with that motivation, came to Glynn one morning and I asked him if I could put together some form of dashboard of the Meat Demand Monitor data specifically to highlight those geographic differences in consumer behavior.
And anytime you have a smart, engaged student that wants to do something that the professor thinks is valuable in the real world, you green light it. So you fast forward to where we are today, and we now have a dashboard. But I would describe the dashboard as a way to visualize the data. State-by-state patterns and then national summary stats are also available from it. But it's more accessible to somebody that isn't a geek in AgEcon like Justin and I are, that kind of live in the data space. That's our job, so we do that, but not everybody can or chooses to put the time into that. So this is a data visualization resource, and we anticipate that it will increase the interest and reach of the project, and by extension, the impact of the broader Meat Demand Monitor effort.
Absolutely. I know AgManager is a tool, obviously, that so many listeners that utilize Ag Today programming or KSRE programming, they utilize AgManager a lot, and this just makes it even more accessible for those users.
That's definitely the goal, and it might be helpful if we give some examples of what you'll find when you go there. So again, go to our AgManager.info website, go under Meat Demand, you'll find this monthly survey effort called the Meat Demand Monitor, and now at the top you will find a link that is to this dashboard. But one of the things that gets talked about in the general food arena is dietary differences. So what's the percentage of the country that regularly eats meat what's the percentage that are flexitarian, what's the percentage that are vegan, vegetarian, and you can find statistics on that over time. Most of them are snapshots and national in nature, and we have the national numbers here as well, and I'll just give a number for example, is about 70% self-declared or regularly consumed meat when given kind of those dietary choices in the second quarter of 2022. Flexitarians nationally is about 12% and about 11% vegan, vegetarian, but that masks a lot of geographic variation that you now can readily see if you go to this dashboard. So in your visual eye, listening to this audio, as you go to the dashboard, you pull up the dietary variables that are sitting there for you. You will now see how state by state, California versus Kansas versus New York, the dietary patterns change. And just as an example, I said 70% self-declared or regularly consumed meat protein in the Eastern Corn Belt and the Midwest, specifically Kentucky, Indiana, Minnesota, and Wisconsin are 4 states that show up. Those rates are roughly 80%. So the share that regularly consumed meat is higher in those 4 states than the national average. Then you, of course, ask what are some examples of states that are below average. So some western states, such as California, and some northeastern states, such as New Jersey and Connecticut, are states that come in with lower rates of regular, self-declaring as a regular meat consumer. That isn't necessarily surprising if you think about socioeconomic differences around the country, but now we can see it. Anybody that's interested in this project can regularly go to that. We can track how it's different in future quarters and so forth, and I suspect that is a simple example that people will have an interest in.
You mentioned previously that this is supported by checkoff dollars, which is amazing because obviously we have all of these numbers that we like to clarify, like, hey, there are issues within our industry, dietary trends, things like that we're trying to address. This gives it actual numbers we can visualize.
Build upon that real quickly is like flexitarian. For those that aren't familiar with that term, it's a self-declared diet where somebody says, yes, I still eat meat, but I'm intentional. I don't eat it in every meal. That group remains a meat customer, think in a week or a monthly kind of time frame, but also remains a group that is a target to consume more. Mm-hmm. So understanding where those, in this case, flexitarians are around the country is a pretty clear market opportunity in my mind for both the beef and the pork communities. So being able to quantify that, track that, I think is important for the industry. And hopefully this dashboard helps folks do that in a little bit easier way.
Justin, I know that Glynn mentioned you're going to share a few more examples with us. So let's start with one having to deal with pork.
Yep. So as Glynn mentioned, we can track diet split. We can also track consumer behavior across animal proteins. So embedded in the Meat Demand Monitor survey are a series of questions asking each survey respondent to recall the number of meals from the prior day that included either beef or pork or chicken or seafood. So from that, we then have a rough estimation of meat consumption by animal protein. And then using the Meat Demand Monitor dashboard, we can then see how this varies across the country. We're seeing from using that dashboard that in the Midwestern states of Kansas and Missouri, respondents are eating on average pork in between 0.57 and 0.66 meals the prior day. In the southeastern states of Louisiana and Georgia, those respondents are eating pork in about 0.6 meals. In the northeast and southwest, that pork consumption is a little lower, hovering around 0.35 meals.
Those are the number of meals 0 to 3 the prior day, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You could include them for 3 or you could include them for 0 and anything in between, so those are averages by state. But the real punchline that Justin shared was the Midwest and southeastern states. The rate of including pork in your meals is almost double what it is the northeast and the southwest states. So you can pull up the exact numbers that Justin's trying to walk you through, but there's a sizable difference in the rate of meal inclusion specific to pork, and again, that drives home the value of the dashboard. Samantha, if I may, I'll take us to inflation. Let's connect the value of this to, we're sitting here early September. Unless you live under a rock, there's been a lot of discussion about inflation in our society. Why am I bringing that up? Specific to meat, we track things that are relevant in the inflation discussion as well. Specifically, something's going on in this MDM effort for several months now, again, trying to contribute to understanding the impact of inflation on meat consumption and demand, was what do you expect prices to be next month? That is something we ask on 4 different retail meat price categories, 2 beef, 2 pork. When we did that for the second quarter, bacon to be 3.2% more expensive the next month. But how does that differ by state? Well, here in Kansas actually was one of the more pessimistic expectations, was prices were expected to be almost 4.5% higher. Conversely, those just one state away in Nebraska were expecting only 2%. So what's underneath those differences we can't speak to. Why would consumers in one state be more concerned or optimistic, pessimistic if you like, is beyond the ability of this data to speak to, but understanding exactly who is anticipating higher prices and therefore potentially tightening their belt at different rates is helpful. The same information is there on ground beef, it's there on ribeye steaks, it's there on pork chops. So I'm trying to give a little bit of a clarity that contributing to current issues, in this case how's inflation impacting how consumers are making decisions, is very helpful. And I hope this dashboard helps with that as well. The longer term, per meal inclusion we just walked through, that's going to be there as well. Obviously, it's called Meat Demand Monitor, so that's going to be core to it.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is probably a question I should have asked earlier, but if people aren't familiar with the Meat Demand Monitor, the different sources of this data, it depends on which dashboard you're really looking at here.
Yeah, that is an important point of clarity, so thank you for asking. This is a U.S. resident nationally representative survey. The underlying raw data is designed to represent the U.S. population. So the number of respondents every month from California is higher than it is Kansas because the relative population is greater. But gender, income, those kind of metrics, also ethnicity and so forth, are, behind the scenes statistics that we're designing the survey and having the right mix of people complete it, consistent with Census Bureau statistics on those measures, to be able to say each month that our sample is nationally representative. This is an important segue, and I'm glad you brought it up, is if you pull up our dashboard, you're going to find some examples where states are whited out. And I'm going to pick on Wyoming just to make my point. This is not a dig on Wyoming. It's just an example where it shows up. Because Wyoming is a less populated state than certainly California and others, the way Justin and I have worked to build this is if there's not 30 observations for the time period you ask for the dashboard to be generated, that state gets whited out. Like literally the state shows up white in a color code, and then everything else is on some purple scale. This project's based at K-State, so purple's good for your soul when you go to the dashboard. But if you see something whited out, it's because we don't have enough observations to confidently say how, in that example, Wyoming would compare. But that's a data quality control factor we've built into the tool.
And I'll add on to that, if you do want data for a state like Wyoming that's thinly sampled each quarter, that's always available through AgManager.
I mean, we might encourage you to look at it annually instead of monthly or quarterly to get enough observations, but thank you, Justin, for that. Is everything's fully transparent. So all the original data that this built upon is already on AgManager. Just the dashboard, I would describe it, hopefully it increases accessibility to the message, like adds value and implications quickly because we can see the patterns in a color scheme, but all the underlying data, including the ones that we've quote-unquote whited out, is available.
Absolutely. It also speaks to the accuracy of this tool for those that are maybe tuning in and being like, I don't understand maybe the behind the scenes of this. This helps kind of speak to that and explain that a bit.
It does, and you'll find some examples. Again, we're not belaboring every variable that's in there to keep this somewhat on target. Utah is a state that showed up with min and max on several things in my notes preparing for today. Well, part of the reason I think that's the case is Utah is one where we do have more than 30 observations, but we don't necessarily have 1,000 in every period. So it's crossed our self-chosen threshold. We're willing to print it, so to speak, but it's probably bouncing around more because it's a smaller sample than California, New York, and Texas, which are more populated states that we have more observations on. So that's important to note. The way Justin's built this is when you hover over the dashboard, each state, it tells you the number of observations that's there. So you'll see the number of respondents is bigger in California every point in time than it is in Utah. That shouldn't surprise folks, but it is a bit of a word of warning that some of the individual state estimates are probably going to bounce a little bit more and the colors are going to change period over period because we do have small samples in some cases.
That's just the fun of research and data research in general, though. So in terms of getting people to this tool, you mentioned it's found on AgManager. It'll be linked in the show notes of today's program, as always, which can be found on agtoday.net. Thank you guys both for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us on, Samantha.
Once again, that was Glynn Tonsor. He is a K-State livestock economist, as well as Justin Bina, a Ph.D. student here at K-State. We'll be back with more ahead on Agriculture Today. This is Agriculture Today. Rounding out today's programming, we have BCI's Ask the Experts. This week we are joined by experts Brad White, Bob Larson, and Phillip Lancaster.
Hi, welcome to BCI Ask the Experts. I'm Brad White. Today I'm joined by Dr. Bob Larson, who does veterinary work here at Kansas State.
Hey, Brad.
And Dr. Phillip Lancaster, who's a beef nutritionist here at Kansas State as well.
Hi, Brad.
I've got a great question for you guys today because at BCI Ask the Experts, we get listener questions, and each of you, as you go through, based on your answer, will be scored with getting up to 10 points. Now, if you have a question for us that you'd like to hear on Ask the Experts, you can send us an email at bci@ksu.edu. Let's jump in with today's question, and it's from a listener that has a fall calving herd, and their question was, I'm coming up on calving and then breeding season. What do I need to do nutritionally for these cows to get them ready for winter? Bob, I'll let you go first.
A lot of the things we talk about for spring calving herds is also true for fall calving herds, but months leading up to the breeding season are a little bit different. The months leading up to a spring calving herd is the winter, whereas the months leading up to a fall calving herd is late summer, early fall. Because typically when I think of a fall calving herd, I think of bulls going out around Thanksgiving. And so then you backtrack and you go, well, what's the 2 months ahead of that? Well, it's September, October, first part of November. And the ideal situation is if you've got some high-quality forage available, because we might have the tail end part of summer grazing, but as you move more into the fall, you might want some of the ranches I've seen that have really made this work well, they have wheat pasture, or they've planted a cover crop or something like that where they've got some green vegetative forage out there and they're not relying just on the dormant forage, particularly as we get into the breeding season. So I think a good forage management plan seems to go hand in hand with the best fall calving operations.
Okay, good point. Phillip?
Well, I will agree with Bob on some points. Having that fall calving herd there in the calves in early September is kind of ideal because you've got that cow coming through the summer without a calf on her. And so she's usually in really good body condition score when she calves. And you usually have good quantity of fall forage. It may not be high quality, but you've got good quantity. And so a little protein supplement will increase the digestibility of that forage. And she can get through to breeding usually pretty good. And then once she's bred in November, December, getting through the winter is fairly easy. I mean, she's going to require some supplement in a little bit, but she can lose a little body condition score because she's not going to have a calf on her next summer, and that green grass next summer, she'll regain that body condition score very easily. So you can get through the winter without as much feed as you think you would need for a lactating cow because you can let her lose some body condition.
Excellent. So both of you made good points. Forage is really critical, and it's a good time of year because of the stage of the production cycle. Both of you went over time. I'm going to go with forage is a little bit of a head. So you've got a little bit of a lead going in here to the final round, which the final round...
Don't blow it now, huh?
No, don't blow it now because the final round is, you guys have told me before that the highest nutritional needs of a cow are early in lactation. What do I do differently with this fall cow than where my spring cow might be meeting that on grass?
And it'll be interesting to see exactly what Phillip says. So you're talking about lactation basically through the months of December and January is when her peak lactation is going to occur. And it's all about, do you have the forages? And if it's a dormant forage, you're definitely going to need some protein supplementation in order to get good intake and stuff. So the beauty of a spring calving herd, particularly a spring calving herd that calves about in April around here, is you've got the best grass of the year right during peak lactation. And with these fall calving cows, probably not. Again, the good operations seem to be able to work around that, but they need a little bit of experience, and you can't just jump into this without really learning about attributes of a fall calving herd.
Excellent. So Bob basically ate up all your time. Phillip, you don't get any chance to respond. I'm not sure he answered you've got the challenge there in the fall. I appreciate your not answering the question. You've got to feed them extra as you go through, so you're going to have to supplement. Forage management is critical for those fall calving cows, making sure that they're ready and getting them time for the breeding season. So appreciate you joining us today. Sorry Phillip didn't get an answer again, but I'll give him bonus points because he didn't get an answer. So Phillip takes home the win, 9-7. And if you have questions or things you'd like us to talk about on future episodes, you can send us an email at bci@ksu.edu with BCI Ask the Experts in the subject title.
Once again, those were BCI experts Brad White, Bob Larson, and Phillip Lancaster for this week's Beef Cattle Institute's Ask the Experts. That concludes today's programming. We'll be back with more tomorrow on Agriculture Today.